Content warning. Episodes of Grey Matter may contain themes and depictions of extreme mental illness, traumatic bodily harm, and death. If you aren't in the right headspace to engage with those depictions right now, maybe this episode should wait for another time. Otherwise, proceed with caution.
Hello, and welcome back to Grey Matter. Are you all right? Are you sure? Because I know that look on your face. I can see the yawning emptiness inside you, the painful, stabbing yearning we call grief that you're desperately trying to push down as it claws its way up from inside the black hole that used to be your heart. And you know all it wants is to come scrambling up from the back of your throat so it can slip between your teeth and splatter to the ground like black, burning bile, to be undeniable by sight, sound, and smell, so that every horrified person you meet knows exactly how much pain your fragile mind is drowning in. It's a cry for help. It's either that or indigestion. I always get those two faces mixed up. You know humans, they all look alike. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, right. Grief. Is there anything worse? Unfortunately, yes. What if you know someone is dead? You just know, but no one will let you believe it. Whether it's because they can't face it themselves or because they can't watch you face it, denial is a powerful thing, and if you're surrounded by it, inundated with it, it's a tempting thing, too. Soon enough, you doubt yourself, try to convince yourself that they just might be right, and then, inevitably, you sit and wonder. You torture yourself, running through the details over and over in your mind for hours at a time, because how can you really know? How can anyone? Well, hopefully this tape can help. It's called The Raven, and it's about a woman with a husband who is missing, and she presumes dead. But without proof, without knowledge, how can she grieve? How can she have closure? Maybe, like the rest of us, the only thing she'll have forever is the not knowing. Never less, and never more. The Raven. Written and directed by Jonathan Inbody, and adapted from the poem of the same name by Edgar Allan Poe.
It was midnight when I woke up. I reached over out of groggy impulse, brushed my hand over the cold, empty spot on the bed next to me, then sighed and sat up. What was that? Where was it coming from? Was it someone at the front door? The police? Or... My heart skipped a beat. No, it couldn't be. I got out of bed and threw on a shirt and shorts, then opened the bedroom door and listened. The harsh, distant tapping continued, drifting up from downstairs, and as I tiptoed down the hall, I wondered if I shouldn't stop to grab a baseball bat or something. Well, if they were there to hurt me, it would kind of defeat the purpose of knocking, wouldn't it? I started down the stairs, eyeing the front door as soon as it came into view, but I couldn't make out the shape of a face in the window. There was only black, endless in total. My hands began to shake as I reached for the doorknob, and when I turned the deadbolt, I thought my heart would beat out of my chest. But when I pulled it open, there was no one there. The yard was dark, and the street past it was empty, and there was nothing on the concrete porch except a few neglected plants. I was alone. The noise sounded again, this time from my right, and my eyes darted over to the door to the next room. It was coming from inside the office. His office. No one had used it since. The door was always closed, and I couldn't bear to look inside. So who? As the tapping sounded again, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The stale air, unused desk, and empty chair hit me like a brick. He was still gone. Of course he was. But there was something tapping at the window. I pressed my face up to the glass, squinting to try to get a better look outside. Then, as a sharp beak bounced off the other side of the glass, I jumped back and fell to the floor, watching in shock as a dark pair of wings flapped and twitched. It was a blackbird, a raven, tapping a frantic 1-2 rhythm against the glass, bobbing up and down in the open air as it stared at me, wide-eyed. What do you want? Get out of here! It's your reflection, stupid. It's not another bird. Get! I'm serious. It's the middle of the fucking night. I pulled open the bottom of the window, smacking at the screen with my palm as I tried to make a noise loud enough to scare it off. Its beak jabbed down at me, puncturing the screen and snipping at my finger, and as I pulled my hand back, the screen fell out of place. The blackbird swooped inside, squawking and flapping, and when I raised my arm to keep it out of my face, I felt its taloned feet dig into my skin. They scratched and stabbed as its beak jabbed down over the top of my hand, poking towards my eye as if it wanted to gouge it out, and with a blind, desperate swing, I backhanded it into the window frame. I jumped to my feet as it struggled to right itself, reaching out with both hands to shove it outside. When its bulging eye met mine, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. I shot out a hand and pushed the bird outside, watching in stunned silence as it flapped off into the dark. Had it said something? Had it just spoken to me? Before I had a chance to keep wondering, the bottom of the window came down on the back of my hand. Ow! God damn it! The next morning, entirely too early, my mother came over and brought me breakfast. She eyed the bandage wrapped around my hand, glanced up my long sleeves to my face, and tried to put on a pleasant face as I let out a sigh.
Are you all right, Joanna? You look like hell.
I didn't sleep very well last night.
You probably inherited my bladder. I can't make it 2 hours without having to...
Not a great conversation for breakfast, Mom.
I know. Sorry. I paid for the food. I ought to be able to decide the conversation.
Thank you for bringing it over.
Of course, honey. You know, I talked to Marianne the other night. She was saying that when her husband fell off the wagon, they didn't see him for months.
Mom, please.
I'm just saying there's still time for Liam to come home. It's only been 6 weeks. It's not even long enough to know if you're pregnant. Thank God you don't have kids. Can you imagine?
He wouldn't just leave like that. This is his house, remember? All his stuff. And it's not... We were happy, Mom. He loved me. I loved him. He wouldn't just leave me.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he was in some kind of trouble.
He would have told me. I would have helped. And for the record, if he was going to leave me, he would have just kicked me out. Not vanish in the middle of a fucking camping trip.
Honey, we've been through this. How long did all those people look? Days? Weeks? If he was out there, they would have found him. Sure, he left the car, but he took his wallet, his phone, his keys. I mean, I don't know how much you've looked around. He might have come back and packed a bag before you got home. And the phone number still rings. It's not
It rings because I paid the bill. It doesn't mean he's on the other end ignoring my calls. And he always kept his location off, so he doesn't help anyway. Please, Mom, I don't want to fight with you. What did you do when Dad died? How did you cope? I mean, when did you stop doing his laundry in case he walked through the door?
That's different, Joanna. Your father.
I know. He had a heart attack. He died on the couch. I know. But I need to know how you dealt with it. What did you do to not feel it as much. I don't want to argue, but I know what you think happened to Liam. I've heard it. And now I need you to give me some support, okay? Some advice, some mother-daughter shit. I need that.
After your dad died, after the funeral and the burial, I don't think I left the house for 2 weeks. Not because I thought he was out there, but because I knew he wasn't. I didn't want to live in a world like that. But I got myself together, and I got back on the horse, and I made the best of a bad situation, okay? And that's what you've got to do.
Okay.
I love you, Joanna, and I believe in you, but you've got to keep trying. You'd tell me if you needed to go back into the hospital, right? Because I know before Liam, you...
I'm fine. I'm not crazy. I'm not suicidal. I'm scared and depressed and alone, okay? And...
What is that?
It's that stupid bird! He's trying to get into the... I stopped short in the office doorway. The screenless window sat just under halfway open, the bottom of the wooden frame dotted with small scratches, and perched on the back of Liam's slowly spinning office chair was the raven. It looked at me, shifting its weight to keep its balance as it tilted its head, and it idly clacked its beak as my hand curled into a fist. You figured out how to open the window, didn't you? Clever little bastard.
Joanna, what's...
Never get. Never.
You little fucker! Get out of here! Can't you take a hint? I lunged out to grab it, and it swung a claw at my face, raking 2 talons down my cheek as I screamed. One of my hands wrapped around its wing, and I threw it to the ground, then kicked it into the wall and reached up to check on my face. On the floor, the raven squawked and writhed, its broken wing flapping aimlessly as it tried to roll to its feet. But when I tried to step up to kick it again, I felt my mother's hand clutching my arm tightly.
What are you doing? It's just an animal.
I hope you're happy. It got away.
Yeah, I hope it did. You're scaring me, you know that?
You don't understand. It tried to get in here in the middle of the night, then it attacked me when I tried to scare it off. That's what happened to my hand.
From where I was sitting, you attacked it.
Thanks for coming over, Mom. It means a lot to have you on my side. The scratches on my face weren't that deep, at least not once I washed the blood away and put on some antibacterial ointment. The ones on my arm were already scabbed over, and despite the tiny flap of torn skin on the tip of my finger and the bruising just below my knuckles, my hand wasn't much worse for wear. I sat stewing for an hour or two after my mother left, staring at the closed office door as if I expected to hear the sharp, punctuated tip-tap of the raven at any second. With any luck, the damage I had done to its wing had left it grounded, and hopefully by now it had become an early lunch for a neighborhood cat. I almost screamed when I heard someone knocking on the front door, half convinced it was going to be the angry owner of a pet bird in a sling, but when I opened it, I saw my friend Alice waiting on the stoop. Hey.
Hey. I was just driving by and I thought Your mom asked me to check on you.
Yeah, I kind of figured. Come on in.
Sorry I haven't been around more after... Well, you know. I just want you to know how sorry I am that you have to go through this.
I appreciate it. How's your brother?
Oh, good. He's doing a lot better. My first instinct was to ask you if anything was new, but...
Not really. I'm just stuck waiting.
Right. God, if after all this, if he's not... Well, you know what I mean. If Liam just comes back and acts like none of this ever happened, I mean, what an asshole, right? Well, not if he's,
I know what you mean. My mom keeps saying that he just left me, and it's fucked up, but I just wish she was right. Because at least then he'd be out there somewhere, you know? And not just gone.
I'm really sorry, Joanna. I know Liam and I had our differences, but I didn't want any of this for you. Do you want a hug or...
She stepped over to put her arms around me, then caught sight of my bandaged hand and stopped, her eyes widening slightly as she furrowed her brow.
Did something happen?
Yeah, there's this bird that keeps trying to...
If Liam's alive, if he's hiding here and he's in some kind of trouble, you don't have to keep covering for him. I've seen your bruises before, remember?
No, there's a blackbird. It keeps trying to get in. It scratched my face. The window fell on my hand. It wasn't...
Where is he, Joanna?
I don't know! Why won't you... Why can't you just listen to what I'm telling you? Why is it so hard for you to believe me? I don't know where Liam is. Nobody knows, because he's probably lying somewhere dead, and you might think that's good because you never fucking liked him, but I loved him. And he loved me. And I don't care what you think you saw, or what you think you know, because he would never hurt me. And he never did.
I didn't mean...
You've known me forever, right? Since we were kids. Have I ever been able to lie to you?
No, but that doesn't... What the hell? What is that?
The window at the top of the door exploded inward, showering us with glass as the raven plunged through, then swooped up with its talons bared and latched onto my shoulder. It flailed and shrieked, swatting at my face with its wings as its beak went for my eyes, and I heard Alice scream from a few steps away. I grabbed the raven's beak and held it closed, clutching the feathers in the center of its chest with my other hand as it tried to wriggle out of my grip. I felt its claws tearing up my forearm, and its broken wing smacking against my face over and over. But just before it pulled its beak out of my grip, Alice dove towards us with a coat. She covered the bird and pulled it away from me, then turned and flung the coat against the wall. The bird shrieked again, darting back and forth in the thick fabric to find a way out, but when Alice came to check on me, I stepped past her and crouched down for a piece of broken glass. I found one, even if its edges sliced my fingers as I gripped it. I slid a foot beneath the edge of the coat and flipped it off the panicking bird, and as it shot up to gouge my eyes out, the jagged shard of glass was there to meet it. The glass sunk into the bird's twitching neck, sending a spurt of hot blood spattering to the carpet. It flailed, wildly flapping its wings and scratching with its taloned feet, then tried to pull away from me and fly off. It twisted on its broken wing and spun to the ground, skidding across the carpet and leaving a bright red streak, and it turned its head to look at me as I grabbed a shoe and got ready to stomp on it.
Again. No more.
Shut the fuck up! I looked down at the pulped, mangled bird, half smashed and seeping deep red blood out onto the carpet, and as its broken wing twitched, its cracked beak uselessly opened and closed, a quiet hiss escaping from its mouth as its eyes turned glassy. The pulsing 1-2 rhythm of blood gushing from around the edges of the glass embedded in its neck slowed, then stopped, and finally, the spurts of blood turned into a slow, steady trickle. I looked back at Alice, staring at me in horrified shock, then looked down at my hand. The thick cut running along my palm and the inside of my fingers was bleeding now, oozing bright red like something out of the movies, and I could tell from the stickiness at my collar that my shoulder was bleeding too. I limped over to the door and kicked my blood-soaked shoe off, gagging as it bounced off the wall and left a red mark. But as I turned to say something to Alice, a flash of movement from outside the broken window caught my eye. There, sitting on the telephone wire across the street, was a flock of ravens. No, not a flock. What do they call it?
Joanna, what the fuck is going on?
I told you. The bird, it's... You saw it.
Yeah, I saw it. But why? Did it talk? Was it saying something?
Nevermore.
What does it mean?
I don't know. But it's not alone.
We have to call someone.
Like who? Come here. Help me get cleaned up.
What are you... You can't just act like that didn't happen.
Alice! What else am I supposed to do? She got a washcloth from the bathroom and helped wipe off the blood, then wrapped my injuries in gauze and bandages in a shell-shocked haze. While we sat at the kitchen table, her bandaging and me wincing with pain, she tried to make some sense of what we had just seen.
Some birds can talk, right? If somebody trains them? Maybe somebody sent them after you.
Why would they?
I don't know. Does Liam's family raise animals? Maybe they think you had something to do with him going missing, or...
That's a complicated way to try and get revenge.
Well, I'm just spitballing. What do you think?
I think they're here to remind me that he's dead, that he's not coming back, that I won't see him again. Never more. Never again. Or maybe that I'll never be sure. That I can move on and try and live my life, and 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road, I could open the door and he could just be there, you know? Like everything I do from this moment on is hinged on him. Whether he's here or not, I just have to sit and wait. I have to live in that moment when I realized he was gone, in the minutes between calling the police and waiting for the search party to give up and stop looking.
But why? Why remind you of any of it at all? Just to hurt you?
Maybe they think I should be dead too. Maybe they think a husband and a wife ought to be together.
What are you saying?
I don't know. I'm just tired. I just want it to end. I just can't wait anymore. Alice stayed with me for the rest of the day, half so that she could make sure I was all right, and half so that I could make sure she wasn't calling my mother. I didn't need anyone to worry or to lecture. I just needed someone to help. And if they wouldn't, or couldn't, then I didn't have all that many choices left. I finally convinced her to leave just before sundown, after trying desperately to explain to her just how little sleep I had had the night before for the better part of an hour. She waited outside while I locked the door and reinforced the duct tape holding the cardboard in place that was covering the broken window, and I think she thought I couldn't see her nervously watching the telephone wires, but with a promise to be back first thing in the morning and a wave, she was off. I felt bad lying to her, but I couldn't sleep. Not with the raven's words rattling around inside my head. Never was a long time. Never was a hell of a check to cash. I could never move on. I could never forget. I could never go the rest of my life wondering if Liam might turn up someday. The national park was a little over an hour away, and even though I left the house with a kitchen knife and my face wrapped in a thick scarf, the birds outside didn't bother me. They watched, though, turning their heads in black unison as I backed my car out of the driveway. When I stopped at the end of my street, I saw them fly off in all directions. Maybe they really did want me to go back there. Back to that spot on the hiking trail where he proposed to me, and the campsite where I'd last seen him. Maybe they thought I belonged there. And who was I to argue? Maybe he'd be there waiting for me with a smile on his face. Would he be happy that I was still waiting for him? I parked in the same lot where I waited for the police to tell me that I couldn't make a missing persons report yet. The same lot where I cried in my car as I watched the search party disband and go home 5 weeks ago. There should have been some finality then, or at any one of the 1,000 steps I had been forced to walk since the day he disappeared. But even now, even still, it felt fresh enough to have happened yesterday. I turned my phone's flashlight on and headed for the trail, scanning the lot to make sure I wouldn't run into anyone camping. Soon there wouldn't be any need for explanations, but right now I couldn't afford them. I shivered when I passed by the spot where our tent had been set up, and it took everything in me not to sniff the air for a hint of his cologne. I knew it was stupid, but I still wanted to. I walked past the trails where I had directed the search parties, and a few miles down, when I reached the side of the cliff overlooking the river, only 15 or 20 yards from where we had stood and held hands the day I first wore his ring, I felt like I was going to pass out. The spot wasn't where anyone was supposed to be. It wasn't a trail, a campsite, only a sheer drop through the forest down to an inhospitable river. I lifted one leg over the thin wooden railing, and then the other, and I looked down at the sharp rocks on the sloped riverbank in an almost wistful silence. But then, through the dense trees, just past a massive rock and underneath a low-hanging branch swaying in the cool night breeze, I saw a squat, shallow hole with piles of dirt scattered all around it. I felt my mouth go dry. He wasn't where I buried him. I dumped the climbing gear out of my bag, my knees shaking as I unwound the braided rope and secured the carabiners. I slipped the harness on and checked the anchors, my heart still pounding in my chest. And by the time I had secured my rope on a thick tree trunk and taken my place at the edge of the small ravine, I was unsure if my trembling hands would be able to hold on. It was dark now, getting darker, but I had to know. I rappelled down the side of the ravine through a patch with only thin trees, swearing under my breath the entire way, and I only had to use the assisted braking device to slow down at the bottom. I unhooked myself from the rope and left it dangling, then ducked underneath the low-hanging branches and headed for the dug-up grave. If someone had found him, why hadn't I heard? Even if he had decayed quicker than expected, they could have identified him by the teeth. I stopped short a few feet away, lightheaded and uneasy. I had hoped to never come back here, or at least to wait long enough that I knew the state of what I came here to find. But, like I told myself as I gritted my teeth and forced my foot forward, I no longer had the luxury of ignorance. The shallow grave was empty, with only a long drag mark in the dried mud leading a few feet down the riverbank. Maybe an animal had gotten to it, a few days or a week after the search party gave up on looking, and dragged the body back to some godforsaken lair where it could gnaw on the rotting bones. But no. There were small indentations in the long drag mark in the dirt, places where fingers dug in for grip, and spots where the impressions from the bottoms of shoes were half pushed in. Liam had dragged himself out. He'd been alive when I buried him. I followed the drag mark down to the edge of the river where it disappeared, then stood staring at the slowly passing water as I wondered what had happened. Had he tried to use the current to get somewhere someone could help him? Or had he just been that desperate for a drink of water after waking up with half his bones broken and covered in 1.5 feet of dirt? I traced the foam on the top of the slow rapids down the dark river, and my eyes came to rest on a crest of jagged rocks just before a waterfall where the river split in two. There, barely visible, wedged in the narrow space between two large rocks, was a ragged, half-decayed body. It was bobbing slightly as the water rushed past, the vacant skull sliding one way or the other as its limp limbs swayed, and its shirt sat open and shredded above a caved-in ribcage. Even as I approached from the shore, I could see the scratch marks on the ribs reflecting in the moonlight from above, and the dried-out optical nerve dangling from an empty socket filled the rest in for me. He had dragged himself out of the grave, floated down the river, gotten wedged in the rock, and as he sat in trapped, futile agony waiting to die, the birds descended on him. A flock. No. A murder. I could almost see them, their beaks wet with blood as they greedily sucked his guts down their gullets, their black feathers glittering in the sun like the freshly laundered cloak of nature's grim reaper. I wonder if he begged, if he screamed, or if all that was left to be drowned out by the sound of rushing water was a quiet, rasping death rattle. Even he didn't deserve that. I had to do it. You know I had to. You were going to kill me. You wouldn't have meant to do it, but it still would have happened. Maybe I'd have hit my head when you threw me against the wall, or broken my neck if you pushed me down the stairs. Hell, maybe you'd have given me a blood clot just by holding my neck too tight. But sooner or later, one way or the other, it would have happened. Might as well call it destiny. But I didn't mean to do this either. I didn't want to. I didn't plan it. But we were here because you wouldn't fucking listen to me when I said that I wanted to go somewhere else, and I didn't have a choice because it's not my house. It's not my money. It's not my life. It's the life you wanted to live. That you wanted me to live, and I loved you, and I trusted you, and I... After the way you treated me, after how much I hated myself for letting you... For you to say you wanted to be a father. I couldn't let you treat anyone else the way you treated me. You understand, don't you? Or you would if someone could have sat you down and made you listen. You would have understood. God, Liam. I'm so sorry. I watched the shredded body bob lifelessly against the rock, buoyed by the current of the river, and my face hardened. There was no understanding there, no forgiveness, only the cold, rotting truth. Whatever part of him that was human, it was gone now. Carried off down the river or picked out of his guts by sharp, stabbing beaks. I was alone, and I always had been. I decided against trying to move the body. It was bound to be found sooner or later, and in and of itself it didn't prove my guilt. The grave could be a problem, but if I could cover it up, kick dirt over the drag mark and smudge out the dried-up blood trail, it wouldn't look like anything more than a tragic accident. I did my best, half resolved to come back with a shovel to cover up what was left, and hooked my harness back into the climbing rope and pulled myself off the ground, planting both feet firmly on the steep rock wall as I got ready to start the grueling climb back up to the trail in my car. Halfway up, my arms were weak and my forehead was soaked with sweat. Even the cool night breeze wasn't helping, but I was so close. I turned my head to look at the moon and frowned. Off in the distance, a dark, rippling cloud of teeming black shapes was moving towards me. I pushed off the wall and tried to climb faster, biting the side of my lip as I struggled to keep my balance. This was easier with a partner, or at least easier on the way down, and my sneakers weren't getting much traction on the layered rock. The distant flock got closer, soaring and swooping and chattering in shrill, shrieking tones. The terror sat in my gut like wet cement, dragging me down as my trembling arms desperately tried to pull me up. Every second I wasted, they were getting closer, ready to descend on me like clawed, beaked, and feathered hell. My hand slipped and I slid a few feet down, jarring painfully to a stop as I squeezed the assisted brake. My injuries, which had seemed trivial on the way down, were radiating pain, and I could feel the scabs on my arm tearing open as I twisted it to get a better grip. I had been so stupid, so confident, and so terrified of what I might find. I was in no shape to climb, not with a bandaged hand, a bleeding shoulder, and 1,000 scrapes and scratches. But what else could I have done? I found a pair of strong handholds and flattened myself against the rock wall as the cloud of ravens swooped down to meet me, diving and twirling in furious circles as I tried to hide my face. They tore at me, pecked at the back of my legs, and ripped out clumps of hair, and I screamed as I felt a sharp beak stab into the side of my heel. Stop it! Stop! You're gonna kill me! You're dead! Don't you understand? I killed you! I jabbed back with my elbow, knocking a bird back as 2 more shot in to claw at me. Then, I pulled my legs up toward my stomach and pushed off of the rock face, flailing wildly in all directions as the birds swarmed. I swung back and my shoulders slammed against the rock, sending a jolt of pain up my neck, and in the second before I raised my arms to cover my face, I saw the countless ravens swoop in. They were on me then, pecking and clawing and jabbing and smacking like angry bees from a defensive hive. I felt a chunk of flesh on my arm get torn away, the skin snapping like ripped tape, and a flurry of beaks pressed through the gap between my arms, clacking madly and poking at my eyes. I kicked out with one leg and then the other, knocking a few birds away for a second's reprieve, then grabbed at one with my open hand and throttled it. I squeezed its neck until I heard it crack, then slammed it against the rock beside me and dropped it, listening to it bounce as it fell into the dark. You should have seen the look on your face when I pushed you, and the way you just folded when you hit the bottom. Such a big, strong guy when you were fighting someone half your size. But the second someone got one over on you, you were so fucking small. A bird pushed its head through the gap in my arms, and as I shot my hand up to grab it, a seam of flesh tore open on the top of its head, revealing a bloodshot human eye. I jabbed a thumb in and closed my eyes to keep from being blinded by the blood. A fluttering wing slapped at the side of my head with grasping human fingers, jet black and rotted, and I turned and bit them off at the knuckle. Fuck you! Do you hear me? Hit me with everything you've got, you piece of shit! I can take it! I grabbed and gouged and punched and kicked, hot blood rolling down my limbs as I desperately fought for what was left of my life. With every flash of pain, I could feel his hand gripped tightly on my arm, his hot breath on my ear, his knuckles rapping against my temple, but I wasn't about to stop. I grabbed a raven with a crest of human teeth encircling its neck that were flaring out to bite me, then flung it against a rock and felt its wing break in my hand. I tossed it out, watching the crest of teeth twist in like a closing camera lens as the broken bird swerved and dropped out of sight. I am not afraid of you! Do you remember what I said? Never again! No more! Never! You understand? I looked up just in time to see the rope snap, then felt it as my body started to drop. I dropped through the cloud of swirling birds and out the bottom, bounced and scraped against the rock, and shredded my fingertips as I tried to stop myself from falling. Finally, I landed in a heap in the rocky sand at the bottom of the ravine. I coughed and spit out blood, trying to move my legs to see if they were broken, and stopped when I felt a broken bone grind in one of my ankles. My phone had been smashed to bits in my pocket. My arms were bloody, my fingers friction burnt, but I still managed to drag myself towards the water as the birds circled above me. Just a tragic accident. That's what I had wanted them to think. And by the time anyone found me down here, there wouldn't be much evidence left to disprove it. Before that, I knew they'd wonder, the way I had wondered, torture themselves racking their minds for any missed signals or hidden signs, desperately hoping to hear a knock at the door or a 1-2 tapping at the window that meant I was out there waiting for them. In a way, I was. Another missing person for posters and milk cartons. Another lost soul left drifting somewhere in the great unknown. Just a memory to haunt mothers and friends. But as I pulled myself into the stream, hoping for a friendly current and a campsite close to the water, I couldn't help but wonder, what if no one ever found me? No one but the birds, bugs, and coyotes. But then, years or decades later, some kid would reach for a rock at the bottom of a creek and pull up one of my bones. And he'd wonder who I was and what had happened. But in some ways, he'd be the only one to ever know for sure. Better late than never, I guess. But hey, maybe I'd be fine. Maybe there was a campsite just down the river, with dry clothes, warm blankets, and a fully stocked first aid kit. Maybe the birds circling like vultures overhead would go find something else to pick at. Maybe not. But you never know.
The Raven was written and directed by Jonathan Inbody and adapted from the poem of the same name by Edgar Allan Poe. It was edited by Jeffrey Lavin, with music composed and performed by Samantha Hunt. Joanna, the narrator, was played by Charleston Harvey. Joanna's mother was played by Andrea Inbody, Alice was played by Alyssa Grace Adams, and Samantha Hunt played the Raven.
Gray Matter is a Word Search Media production. Any similarities to real people, places, or things is purely coincidental.
If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And support us at patreon.com/graymatterhorror.
Be kind. Rewind.